Just finished listening to an interview on TV of a guy who was talking about coming out to his parents in the 80s and how difficult it was to come out in the 80s. I thought, boy, you should have come out in the 50s like I did if you think it was difficult in the 80s. By 1972, I was in the middle of founding an MCC church in the city. A lot of people in this city were not happy with that. I received all kinds of death threats. I had a couple of bodyguards with me for quite a while. Big bruisers. But there were a lot of people in the town who were for it. And had a big symposium at UNO where the liberals and the conservatives had this big discussion. Troy Perry came in for that. At any rate, we founded the church, and I got John Kirkland from Zion's Baptist Church to be my choir director. Chuck Miller who played organ at St. Cecilia's. Oh, I had some wonderful talent. And our choir was good, so good it got invited to sing all over the city. And often I'd be invited to speak. And I just, Troy Perry had written that wonderful book, The Lord is My Shepherd and He Knows I'm Gay. Can you find a better title for a sermon? So I plagiarized from Troy wherever I went. So it was quite something to do that in the 70s. It got to be a lot easier by the 80s. In the 50s, it was really quite something. And I grew up not really knowing. I didn't realize I was gay. Most kids just don't. I did the usual fiddling around behind the barn with other boys my age and with girls my age, and wasn't kind of really over enthusiastic about either. I was busy. I was stamp collecting and coin collecting and book collecting and being in school plays and singing and, hunting and fishing with my dad. I wasn't much of a hunter. I didn't like it, but I loved fishing with my dad. We went, frequently to Lake Kapowsin and places. So then I joined the Air Force after high school, and I fell in love almost immediately. Surprised myself, shocked myself, as a matter of fact. And a couple of months later, wrote my mother about it and came out. I had no idea what happened, but I knew that I didn't hear from her for about 3 months, not a word, and I had been hearing it, a couple letters a week. When their firstborn son joins the Air Force, mothers write a lot of letters. I just kept writing a letter every week, as if I was getting one, but I left out anything about my love life. And eventually, several months after that, I came out to my dad on telephone. And eventually I went home for vacation. And I was sitting on the front porch with my dad. And suddenly he said, when you figured out you were gay, you should have told me first. And then I could have broken the news to your mother gently. Because, she went to bed for 2 months. She was so depressed. I had to do everything around here. And I said, well, you have a gun collection. I was more afraid to talk to you than I was to her. He said, well, I knew all the time you were gay. And besides, I've known gay people. There's gay people in this town. When I was in San Francisco, I had friends who were drag queens. I lived with drag queens for a while. You lived with drag queens? Yeah, the picture in the album of those two fellas kissing me on the cheek on the streets of San Francisco. The drag queens. Did you do anything besides stay with the drag queens? That's none of your business. But I knew about gay people. I could have told your mom. Besides, I knew you were gay. I said, well, what do you mean you knew I was gay? If you knew I was gay, why didn't you tell me I was gay? All that fishing we did together, all those things we did together, and you knew I was gay? Well, you didn't like sports and football and any of those things in high school. You were in the plays, you sang, you were in the band, you played the bass viol, you collected stamps. And when you got your driver's license at 16, most boys, the first thing they want to do is take a girl to a drive-in. We had a Model T and a pickup in those days. And I told you could use the Model T or the pickup if you wanted to. You just had to buy your own gas. And is it the first time you used the Model T? You took a bunch of your sissy friends and you all went to Tacoma to see that Broadway musical film, with the Hepburn film, that Roman Holiday. You don't need much bigger sign than that. Well, so things were okay with my family. But what my father didn't tell me was how he met the drag queens. And I was so relieved to be accepted, it never occurred to me to ask. He was in San Francisco, he met drag queens at a drag show. I don't know. He had met them through his brother. He had a brother who was gay. He didn't tell me that. People didn't talk about things like that in those days. I didn't know that I had an uncle who was gay till I was interviewing my grandmother. I interviewed her for years because I always wanted to know family history. In fact, eventually I taped much of it, first on wire recordings, then, reel-to-reel cassettes. And one time when I wanted to know a secret, Grandma told me about my gay uncle. And she only told me because she thought I already knew. Because I knew so much. I mean, you can't ask the kind of questions I asked my grandmother and not know a lot. And I knew a lot because when my dad and I would go fishing at Lake Kapowsin, that's all we did was talk. Finally recorded all of this, all of those wonderful, not all of them, but some of the most tantalizing and interesting ones in a memoir of those my grandmother called the Button Box. And this story is in there, too, about her telling me about my uncle. And I said, I had no idea. Because I stayed with them, when I was in the Air Force. I was stationed at Parks Air Force Base outside of San Francisco. And I would go 24-hour pass, 3-day pass, and I would stay with Andy and Pops, his roommate, companion. And I slept on the couch, so he slept in the bedroom. It just never occurred to me there was only one bedroom. It never registered. I was too busy wanting to ride, the trolley cars. And my uncle worked sometimes afternoons, and evenings at Ott's Club down on the wharf. He was a bartender. And Pops was a bookie, and he had more time. And so Pops took me everywhere. We rode the trolley cars. We went down to the Fisherman's Wharf. We went to museums. We go down and have lunch where Andy worked. Took me to Chinatown. Bought me my first pipe in Chinatown. He'd let me take tobacco out of his humidor, a special blend. And evenings we'd sit around or talk and smoke pipes. I never took the pipe to the base, though, because you don't want a smelly pipe in your duffel box or anything when you're in basic training. Anybody who's been through basic training knows what I'm talking about. I left it at their place, and I'd go into their place, and I'd smoke my pipe, dip into his humidor. But never occurred to me he was gay until my grandmother told me. So and later I went, I should finish the story about my uncle. Later, of course, he found out that I knew, and I knew that he knew about me, and it was such a wonderful uncle. He never missed my birthday or a Christmas card, and there'd always be $5 in it to go get a martini. I never missed his birthday. And then Pops died, and I called my uncle and gave him condolences. And I said, if there's anything that was Pops that you think you can let go of, even if it's something you're just going to give to the Goodwill or something, I don't know, maybe you're going to keep everything, maybe you don't want any change. But I said, if you find something that was Pops, I'd like to have it. I'd like to have something of his because I grew to love him. Everybody in the family who knew him loved him. And he sent me the humidor. And I still have it, and I still use it, and I still have that pipe. So you see, we gays have history. And those of you who are thinking of coming out, 2013, 2014, whenever, it's never been easy to come out to your family. It's easier now. Will and grace. So much has happened. You get married in Washington State. So hold in there. Don't let people bully you. Don't feel like you're less than wonderful. It gets better and better and better.